Hi, everybody. Let's see if this is working and if everyone can hear me before we get started. Okay. A few seconds here. Yep, there we go. Okay, testing. Okay, I have a new camera and I haven't adjusted it quite yet. We'll see. We'll see. I'll work on it tomorrow. I just plugged it in real quick. Okay, so let's begin. This is June 10th, 2025, and 1,774 days since Richard was forcibly removed from his barracks room. You heard that right, because they were his superiors. They were law enforcement. This was absolutely this, they call it a code red, right? Leilani Hart called it a code red. So she compared it to a few good men. And so they forcibly removed him from his barracks and they took his life. And that happened in 2020. And one of the very first responses that we got was from First Sergeant J. Paulin. Oh, just don't worry. He's so, y'all, he knows what happened. And it's all coming out. And J. Paulin does not deserve to have the retired first sergeant title. No. And the same thing with Michael Ruggiero and his wife, Emma. They all targeted us. They targeted Richard first, though. And they took his life. And they targeted us. And they targeted our whistleblower, Judge Roger Rodriguez. The whistleblower in Richard's case. And they absolutely schemed and conspired and colluded and plotted. And, it's kind of like this whole thing with LA. They want you to think that all of the violence there was just, spontaneous, but it wasn't. It cost a lot of money. There were even maybe there was a tactical headphones used, right? Tactical headphones, walkie-talkies. Remember how Patrick Crucius had his tactical headphones? He had his tactical headphones on. And they have these walkie-talkies, and then they have pallets of all kinds of stones and bricks and and then they were even hammering concrete to get chunks of it. And for the leadership there to have so much access to taxpayer funds, right? They have all kinds of access to everything, to all kinds of policing, all kinds, with the fire department, with everything. Jails, buses, whatever. They have access to all of that. And for them to allow this type of violence where you're throwing bricks and stones off of inner pass um, bridges down to cars, that is so. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if you're riding along and all of a sudden you have a big concrete block go through your window? This is so violent. And for the leadership there to say it's mostly peaceful, that it wasn't violent, is, you know, it's criminal. It's false reporting on what was happening. And and the why would they do that? And even Bass, Mayor Bass, she even smirked. She had these smirks. Go back and watch the videos. She had these smirks. It's so terrible. um and why does she why do they get away with this kind of lying to the public? It's because there's huge funding behind it, huge funding behind her, huge funding behind Gavin Newsom, funding behind these officials, that they are not answering to the people. They are answering to the big funders, to the big donors that want this, that are calling for this, which is so criminal. And who's doing it? Well, this is the question that President Trump asked. This is a question that we're being told that the Department of Justice and the FBI are looking into who is funding it. And, it's a really good question, because whispers are coming out that, the big players are like Christy Walton from the Walmart heiress, which is very interesting because of the Walmart mass shooting, right? The Walmart mass shooting. And what we know about that, what we know about Walmart, they sell weapons, they sell ammunition, and during the Walmart mass shooting, they didn't have any security. They didn't have any security at all. Not a one. Not a one. And they hired Michael G. Mayella for cybersecurity. And we don't have the cybersecurity videos. Where are they? Where are they? And Michael G. Mayella's uh, sister is married to Patrick Crusius, uh, right? Patrick Crusius, the defendant. The you know I can't fathom killing more than one or two people on that day. Of course, um, killing one is even bad. Killing one is enough. And having 26 that perished, and um, so many more injured. And yet we have this video where it's like, where is it? What's going on? What's going on? Um, yeah, the Walmart thing, and knowing that there was investigations going on with Walmart, with Acela Vista Walmart being the known money trafficker through these Walmart gift cards. But Walmart has also a bank. And so something is not right when Walmart is so against um, law and order, because they're funding a lot of things. I don't know if they're funding the LL riots, but this is the chatter going on. And we know in El Paso that there were absolutely investigations going on that involved Walmart, and then to have all the anomalies around the Walmart mass shooting is, it makes you suspicious, on what's going on um, with the whole company. And then, of course, we were being bullied, harassed, threatened by these messages, right? For months at a time, the most vile, vulgar. And we traced these numbers. These were burner phone numbers, and we traced them. And one of them traced to Santa Clara, California. And so one of the suspicions is this tech guy. Um, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But these are all like billionaires, and even like in El Paso, because El Paso and Los Angeles are so connected. They're so connected because they're both huge trafficking hubs, right? They're both huge trafficking hubs. And don't forget that not too long ago, a few months back, they arrested a Chinese student that had violated his visa, was here illegally because his visa had expired, and he was trafficking in the tactical move storage units, military equipment, uniforms, everything to North Korea. And they had come from Texas, and they were going out through California. And so this just shows you, and I can tell you with all of our investigations between the suspects and the connections in our son's case, it is very much so El Paso and California. There's New York, and there's Pennsylvania, and there's, of course, Tennessee because of Clarksville. Um, and because we're a military family, we absolutely know there's Oklahoma. Everywhere where there is a base in Fort Hood. Oh, and today it was announced that Fort Cavazos was going to be changed back to Fort Hood. And I'm so glad for the Cavazos family, because why in the world would you want your name on Fort Hood? And hopefully maybe President Trump will make it proud. And then, but, the way they abused the Cavazos family, that name, to cover up crime and everything going on at Fort Hood. First let's clean it up and everything, and give. Well, I think it's going to stay Fort Hood. We see nothing's forever, but we did hear today that Fort Hood will be Fort Hood again, and I'm very, very happy for the Cavazos family, because that was just so disrespectful, just so disrespectful to them. Um, so yeah, and the speech was had a surprise to me. I get so I'm just I just don't even want these leaders in uniforms with our stars on it to be able to stay there. I just don't want it, because I know how bad they hurt Richard and Glennon Oakley Jr. and Asia Graham, and I could go on and on and on and list all the names, the 11 soldiers that almost died from antifreeze, and the 14-year-old girl that was living in the barracks for 4 months being prostituted out. You could go on and on and on about so many different cases, and all the death, and Fort Bliss being called the death camp because of hundreds of thousands of children being trafficked, 10,000 at a time. So, I get, pretty impatient. I mean, I try to be very patient. But, this is why we're so fast. And you say, what do you mean fast? It's almost been 5 years. Really, for this kind of case, for the enormous case that it is, we are doing pretty good. We're doing pretty good, and I still get impatient. I want, these the accountability. I want accountability, and I want my son's remains. Right? I want my son's remains, and I know it's going to be absolutely hell. I know it's going to be absolutely hell, but it's the right thing to do. Um, and they need to be held accountable for what they've done. And we were very gracious at the beginning. Um, can you imagine if they would have taken us up on our graciousness at the beginning? Oh man. But they just looked at us like deer in a headlight, because they knew what they had done. And you had to have been there at the meetings, because you can't describe it, how they were shaking, how they were, it was almost like they had to go to the bathroom all the time. It was really a mess. It was really, really a mess. And they knew, we knew. Um, but they chose to go to the dark side. And we didn't. And we didn't. We're going to fight for our son, fight for justice. Fighting for our son means to fight for our country, to fight for our military. Uh, Absolutely, to fight, um, for what is right. And so here we are, and so President Trump talking at Fort Bragg today. I really, I just would love for him to say, we're not going to tolerate this kind of criminal behavior, and we're going to absolutely bring these failed leaders back and court martial them, and really get to the bottom of this with the Senate Arms Committee, right? Shake up the Senate Arms Committee too, because they're absolutely part of this, and I'm sure there's more to it than even what I'm saying. So, but he didn't do that. He didn't do that. I wanted him to do that, but he didn't do that. Um, he did something I think even more clever. He asked the question, or he told the crowd, uh, uh, the grunts, the service members, the amazing display of power. And so that's always very, very good. We need a very strong military. These are airborne. So to watch them, matter of fact, we have a huge poster because one of the perfusionists that Rob was a perfusionist at Walter Reed, um, was also part of this special airborne group. And it was just really an honor. And a lot of people don't know this, but Rob served 1 year with the Old Guard. He was the physician assistant with the Old Guard there in Washington, D.C., which was a huge honor. Huge. He has such a beautiful, beautiful record, y'all. He's so decorated and he's so honorable. And, um, and that's, he just signs his name away on all these letters. He just signs his name away on all these letters, and let me tell you, these are international letters, and they're just huge. They go to so many agencies. He's just really a hero, an absolute hero, behind the scenes, behind the scenes. So, um, and so was Richard, and this is his birthday month. And, so it was very interesting to see the direction that President Trump went today, asking and telling, um, Who is behind the LA riots? Who is behind it? Who is funding it? Because you need a lot of funding to go to these non government organizations, these groups, to organize this kind of rioting, you know, and you have to instigate it, right? You have to instigate it. You have to provide everything, uh, people just don't, you have to guarantee them that they are not going to get arrested, right? That they can be get arrested, but they will be let off. That there's no real serious prosecutor there, no serious judges there that will hold them accountable for what they're doing. The defacing of of property, and the attacks on law enforcement officers, which is so bad. I mean, uh, y- it is so bad, and for them to not be held accountable. But now it looks like, I hope they're going to be held accountable for what they've done. But who's funding it, right? Who's um who's at the helm? Who's at the helm? Who's putting all of uh the Benjamins down, right? Who's giving all the Benjamins for all of this? Because it's very expensive. It's very expensive. It has to be someone with deep pockets, very deep pockets, and something that they gain, right? They gain by having cheap labor. Um, uh, if they all go back home, these migrants that have been totally taken advantage of, and I get in trouble sometimes with saying that because people are much harsher. They're like, they come here illegally. They knew better. They're wrong. Well, Mexico is is a failed state, and so they're getting, you know, a carrot is being held in front of them, and they're being taken advantage of. Right? They're probably even being lied to. They're being misled, and a lot of them, let's say 20% of them, which is huge when you're thinking about 13 million. It might be even more than that, are just downright um, really um, nasty criminals, right? Nasty criminals and cartel. They're sneaking in like a Trojan horse, right? They're using the migrants to build a Trojan horse around them, and then they bring in these really severe criminals and cartel members up to no good. And there's so much money in all of this cartel activity, the criminal trafficking activity, because they don't pay taxes on it, right? And they just money launder and all that. So it is, and then they start these shell companies, right? So then, all of those shell companies, they all have to be managed. These shell companies have to be managed. It just takes so much resources and such a fake economy then, right? Then it's so harmful for our country what they're doing with this. I'm always thinking of St. Augustine and the city of man and the band of robbers. They're just a band of robbers. They're just um, grand theft larcenists. That's what they are, grand theft larcenists. And, these very, very, these people really profit off of it and they like it and then they do other things with it. Um, and then they put this facade that they are benevolent, and, and they're not. They're not benevolent. They really are destructive of our country, and they really entrap us. We go to Walmart, we go to these big shops and everything. Um, it's uh, they just really almost don't leave us any choice, right? Because we're having to pay the taxes. We're having to pay the taxes, um, and everyone, you might say, oh, well, I don't pay federal tax, but you pay all these sell taxes. They get you even inflation. Don't forget, inflation is a tax. That's the hidden tax. So, we pay the taxes. And, so for Trump to address this at Fort Bragg in front of the airborne, to let these young men and women know that somebody is funding it. It's like when he came down that escalator and he said, I'm going to build a wall and make Mexico pay for it. I didn't even know who he was. And when he said that, I said, oh my gosh, they're going to, because I was a Ron Paul person, right? We were Ron Paul people. We were all about Mises economics and economics of the Austrian School of Economics of, and hard money and audit the Fed and all of that stuff, which hasn't happened yet and it needs to be done. We've been waiting for a long time for them to audit the Fed. So yeah, when President Trump said that coming down the escalator, 2000, what was it, 15 or so, I said, "Oh my gosh, he just told everybody we have a deficit with Mexico, that we have a huge, I think it was 40 billion at the time. We had this huge deficit. It's that Ross Perot, the great sucking sound down in Mexico. It really happened. He was a great prophet, right? Um, Ross Perot with his charts and everything. He told it like it was. He did, and then President Trump revealed, and they made it to be some kind of racist or hateful thing about Mexico. And it's like, no, no, it's just that we owe Mexico so much money all the time. Why? All the time we owe them so much money. We're in deficit to them. That's what he was pointing out, that he is going to um he's going to make the economy so good and make deals with Mexico that at the end of the day, Mexico would pay for the wall and we would get out of deficit of Mexico. That's what he was saying. Something very Americana, very Americana. And that's not how the people took it. That's not how the media knows what he meant, but they're no friend of Trump, right? They're going to spin it. They're going to say the wrong thing. So for Trump to today to get to Fort Bragg and talk about finances again, right? Who is financing um, the LL riots? Who's financing it? That gets to the heart of things. And when you find out who financed the LA riots, you will also learn who funds El Paso. And I believe who funded the hit on President Trump. Who funded the hit on our son, and who funded the hit on President Trump. And that's why this is so important. It really is so important because there's such a connection. And I really, that's how President Trump talks. He talks, and sometimes I don't get it right away. My husband is like, don't you see what he's trying to say? You really have to listen because the media is not his friend. But I think he already knows who funded the LA riots. And I think he already knows who funded the hit on Richard. And I think he already knows who funded the hit on him. And how can you forget that when you have a bullet flying past and getting your ear, shooting your ear? Wow. I don't think you forget that. I don't think you forget that. And, you know, God has absolutely something for him to do. And he's absolutely doing it, isn't he? And so his numbers are going way up because of the way he's handling this. Now, he has a huge job in front of him, and we need to really support him because I hear that there's pop-ups of riots because there's funding, right? There's funding to instigate this rioting in other places in the United States. When you have 13 million, and I'm being conservative, 13 million of people that were brought over here that are illegal, they're illegal. So that means they're very vulnerable. You can be criminals, right? A lot of them are criminals, and just being illegal is a crime. So that makes them a criminal. But when you are a criminal like that, let's say you're not a severe criminal like some of these others, you're still very, very vulnerable. You're very vulnerable, and people can take advantage of you much easier um, than if you were legal. If you were legal. And you see that in the Bible. Let's talk about the Bible a little bit. You see that with the disciples. Um, they were so prosecuted so easily, right? And I mean, they die. If you read Fox's Book of Martyrs, you can read the beginning of the Christian um, gospel, right? The beginning of the gospel as the gospel was being spread, and all the prosecutions and what they did to these Christians and the disciples. But when it came to Paul, who was Saul and became Paul, remember the blinding and all the scales falling from his eyes, and him having a past. They all seem to have a past, right? And God has this great grace with them, and he is he's different, right? He's different. Why is he different? Because he was a Roman citizen. He was a Roman citizen. They couldn't take advantage of him as easily as the non-citizens, right? So they were legally in the but the more status you have, the more protection you have. And so for this Biden administration to take advantage of people and bring them into this country illegally and put them in such a vulnerable position that they would never themselves go into. Look at Hunter Biden, how many privileges he got. The more status he had, the more protection he had, right? I mean, he even got the one pardon that was handwritten. He didn't have what's reported, the auto pen, right? He didn't even have the auto pen. His status was so big, he got the real handwriting, right? So this is Paul. He was a Roman citizen, and so he had this great status. Matter of fact, they went to arrest him. The Romans did. They could not crucify him because no Roman citizen could be crucified. It was illegal. And so they put him on a ship. They were going to bring him back to Rome for his trial. And what they got in a shipwreck, they went to Malta, right? They got a shipwreck to Malta. If you haven't been to Malta, you should. It's this amazing star fort. It's like, who the heck built this thing, right? If you've never been to Malta, and of course Soros, who is named at funding all of these riots and everything like that, has a presence in Malta. Um, it's because, and how do I know? Because I was walking around Malta and I saw his big building and everything. Um, but Malta is just an amazing place, and Paul was shipwrecked there. He Christianized Malta, um, and then of course he went to Rome where he was tried, and they could not crucify him. He was beheaded. He was beheaded. Um, and so it just which sounds terrible, absolutely terrible. But the early Christians went through a lot of prosecutions to bring us law and order, to bring us the Ten Commandments, to bring us the gospel, to bring us the sacraments. The sacraments are so important. You can't have the Ten Commandments without the sacraments. And uh, that's why marriage is so important. That's why, baptism is so important. That's why the Eucharist is so important. That's why unction is so important. Malta is the hospitalers, right? And when you talk about unction and good health and spiritual health, um, um, that is such a gift from God. The hospitalers, their home was Malta. You can go visit huge hospitals there, and how these first hospitals were built. It's just amazing. Um, so, to have elections, that is absolutely the laying on of hands, the ordination. Now, today ordination is like to the holy orders, right? To the holy orders. But, this is the whole thing. You have to elect, the people have a say so. The people have a say so. And this new movement that they're trying to do is there's no kings. Um, it's try saying that to England. They, uh, try saying that to England. They want their kings and queens. They want their kings and queens so bad, and they want to pay the money to have their kings and queens. And they want their kings and queens. Tell that to England. They fought wars in order to have their kings and queens. I mean, look at, you had the Oliver Cromwell, right? Uh, Tried to get rid of the kings. That didn't work out too good. That didn't work out too good. They want the king. Try say, um, so it's just in this country we have what's called the president, the commander in chief, the chief magistrate, and the commander in chief. You know, uh, that's a big deal. That's why he can go to Fort Bragg, and 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 the airborne are coming out of the planes for him and everything like that. Um, and there cannot be a mutiny, and there have been mutinies. In his last, there's just been, you saw that with Millie, you saw everything with Richard. It was all a mutiny. The whole 2020, 2021 was just absolutely a mutiny. Uh, Again, to undo, and you say, oh, 2021 was Biden, but the way they were doing things, um, oh, God, it was so bad. They had to, tens of thousands of children. Um, yeah, they were not doing their duty. They were not doing their duty, no way. And yeah, so we need to do a lot of, and maybe I'm not saying the words quite right. I know Mealy absolutely is a mutineer. He absolutely is a traitor. I know that Sean Bernabe is absolutely a traitor. I know that Michael Garrett is a traitor. I know, Clem Coward is a traitor. I know they're just traitors. David Stewart is a traitor, total traitor. So, but I'll let the lawyers figure it all out. I'll let the lawyers, because this is where we're at right now. The lawyers, there is a lot of investigations going on, and that's why you even see Veronica Escobar coming out just a little bit, trying, putting her toe in the water, trying to say something. And she just got plummeted, right? She did not get, I don't think she got more than 20%. I don't think so. I don't think she got more than 20% positive messages. She just got plummeted today, and the people that were against her, including ourselves, didn't. I mean, these were severe, severe posts against her, and so that tells you that El Paso is has really swung to a different side. They're absolutely tired of this criminal trafficking, tired of she's went in with like $100,000, or I don't know, just she had some money, but now she has millions. Um, it, and El Paso is left with an El Paso Walmart mass shooting case that was just a total disaster. There's no excuse for that, and there's no excuse for Richard's case to be handled. She should have given us a congressional, right? That was her job, to give us a congressional. But this is the absolute mess that she has created, and she's getting called out for it. So, and I think that when, because we are a government by the people, for the people, of the people, that's when Trump will come. Trump will come when he knows that El Pasoans understand what has been done to them, and that they will understand him, and not believe all the lies that, like, the likes of Bob Moore have painted, right? Not paint. I don't want to say painted. These false lies that they gurgitated. The spewing of their bile. Oh, someone got fired for saying that. Well, Bob Moore, he spews bile, let me tell you. It's just lies. It's absolutely um, worse than that. It's worse than that, because it's all intentional. It's all intentional. It's like his mission. And he works for El Paso Community Foundation, which is a big part of the Hunt group, or whatever. And Hunt's name has come up in all of this. Hunt's name, and Foster's name, and Foster's wife's name. And they just have a lot of cross-border activity, and we'll see what all the investigations come out, but know that there are things happening behind the scenes that are really big, and that it's even though we have gotten information that even corroborates, and the group even more, with Rafael Lasanta Morales, and Zulinka, I hope I have this name right, Negron, and her connections, and even those connections that lead to that criminal group, even to the people that were harassing us, that were threatening us day after day after day, vile and vulgar. They're always use this sexual stuff, right? They're so sick. They're absolutely nothing is sacred to them, right? They're very, very sick in their mind, and they'll just do vile and vulgar stuff day in and day out, and try to intimidate and everything, try to gross you out. And I just say, get behind me, Satan. Just get behind me, Satan. And then I got tired of it, and then we decided to see how we could trace these phone calls, and then we did, and we turned them in, um and then that ended that. That ended that. I mean, we still absolutely were targeted through social media and everything like that. But just don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. And I think the big question is who's funding this? Let's go to the top. Let's go to the top. And really I'm just trusting President Trump right now and his uh how, cuz he's a billionaire. I've never been a billionaire. He's a billionaire. He's had to deal with all of these different people from all over the world when he builds his big towers and all of that, his golf courses, his hotels and everything. Um he has to deal with them. So I'm sure he knows a lot of things that we're in the dark about, and but he's doing a magnificent job. And he gave us a message today, and the message is that they're at the point where they're looking at who's funding all of this. That's where they're at, and that's where we should look to. Who who ordered the hit? Who ordered the hit on him? Who ordered the hit on Richard? Who ordered the retaliation against Judge Rodriguez? And who financed? Who's financing these riots? Right, these riots to hurt our ICE, to hurt our own government, and then you have Scheinbaum wanting that to go on. That she's so dangerous. She's really much more dangerous than Putin. So I think that it's yeah. Keep praying. Thank you for coming on. Good. Um, so thank you so much for coming on, Fran Sanford. And yeah, and I will absolutely be back tomorrow. Thank you. God bless.